There was a man with a guitar across the street, and he'd been playing the same 3 chords for 47 minutes straight. I know, because I counted. He sat out there every Saturday morning like he was auditioning for the role of neighborhood atmosphere. And someone, for reasons still unclear to me, always left him a cup of quarters on the curb. I used to think it was sweet. Now I think it's hush money. I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching Helen through the living room window. She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, reading one of those self-improvement books with a title like Unleash the You Within. I think it was written by a guy named Brent who lives in a condo and refers to his followers as fire souls. Anyway, Helen had been on a self-improvement kick for about 2 months. Morning affirmations, cold showers, journaling with gel pens. Every now and then, she'd look up from her book and nod to herself, like she just discovered a missing chapter in the manual of being alive. It wasn't that she was acting strange, more like she'd been recast. Same hair, same laugh, but the little things had changed. She started meditating. She stopped watching those terrible baking competition shows we used to make fun of. And worst of all, she started drinking almond milk. Nobody who's truly happy switches to almond milk. But none of that really tipped me off. I wasn't looking for clues. I wasn't sitting around, sharpening pencils with suspicion. I just thought we were going through one of those weird grown-up phases where one person starts wearing linen pants and the other person just sort of tolerates it. Then came the neighborhood art fair. Now, this is where the story actually begins. You see, once a year, our quaint little suburb of Maple Ridge, population, board, hosts an event called Art on the Block. It's basically Etsy with sunburn. Folding tables line the sidewalks. Retirees try to sell seashell wind chimes. A local teenager with questionable grooming plays the cello in front of the drugstore. People walk around with overpriced iced coffee pretending to be moved by finger paintings of lighthouses. Helen loved it. She circled it on the calendar in red marker like it was our anniversary. "Dennis," she said, one morning while wearing a sun hat the size of a dinner table, "you never support the arts." "I do support the arts. I just prefer the kind that doesn't involve gluing macaroni to a piece of cardboard and calling it an emotional journey." So we went. Now, let me be clear about something. I wasn't trying to be a detective. I was just trying to make it through the fair without having to fake a single, "Oh wow, look at that texture." But around booth number 9, right between a man selling sculptures made out of recycled lawnmower parts and a woman aggressively insisting her dream catchers cleanse negative energy, I noticed something weird. Helen had wandered off to a booth that sold custom poetry. A tall guy with glasses and a beard that suggested either great wisdom or great confusion was typing on an antique typewriter. His booth was called Heartstrings and Ink, which sounds like a perfume or a particularly dramatic high school rock band. When I caught up, Helen was standing there, laughing at something he said. Not just a polite laugh, either. The real kind. The kind she used to save for late nights and inside jokes. She touched his arm. He smiled in that slow, practiced way, like a man who's been complimented on his handwriting more than once. I didn't say anything. I just watched as he typed something and handed it to her. She folded it and slipped it into her purse. I don't know what Poem Boy wrote. Maybe it was a haiku about destiny. Maybe it was his phone number disguised as a sonnet. What I do know is that Helen didn't mention it. Not once. All day. Later that night, she said she had a migraine. She said she needed some time alone. She said, "You wouldn't understand, Dennis, it's an energetic shift." Energetic shift? What are we, tectonic plates? Still, I didn't push. I just went downstairs and tried to distract myself with a documentary about competitive marble racing. It's a thing. Don't ask. Fast forward a week. I'm in the garage, cleaning out a shelf that hasn't been touched since Obama's first term, when I come across an old shoebox labeled Christmas cards and stuff. Inside, buried under years of cheerful Santa faces and passive-aggressive notes from Helen's cousin Wendy, is a folded piece of typewriter paper. The poem. She must have forgotten she left it in there. Or maybe she didn't expect me to go poking around in the land of dusty wreaths and tangled lights. It read, "Your laugh, like cinnamon in coffee. Unexpected, warm, unforgettable. Your silence, a moon behind the clouds. Only hiding, to keep the stars company." Now, maybe I'm not the most romantic guy in the world. I once gave Helen a coupon for 1-foot rub, redeemable never. But that wasn't the kind of poem a man writes for someone's wife. That was a handwritten invitation to complication. And suddenly, the almond milk made a lot more sense. So I did what any sane, level-headed husband would do. I organized a surprise date night. You know, the kind where you smile too much and say things like, "Let's reconnect," while mentally replaying that poem in your head on a loop. We ended up at this small Italian place we hadn't been to in years, partly because Helen said carbs made her energetically dense now. I was charming. She was guarded. Somewhere between the bruschetta and the awkward silence, I leaned in and asked, "So, do you still talk to that poet from the fair? The one with the beard and the typewriter?" She blinked, paused just a little too long, and then said, "Oh no. I mean, well, he was just being poetic." Poetic. Right. So was Romeo, and look how that turned out. I nodded, smiled, took a sip of my drink, and said, "I read the poem. Cinnamon in coffee, huh? Sounds like something that stains everything it touches." To her credit, Helen didn't flinch. She just looked down at her napkin like it had the answers. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't need her to confess. I didn't need tearful apologies or melodramatic explanations. The silence was its own admission. And somehow, it was worse than shouting. It was organized. Tidy. Like she'd already rehearsed every line in a mirror. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't kick the door down. It waits until you've redecorated the room, then quietly sets the house on fire. I wasn't planning to become the guy who notices things. That wasn't in the job description when I signed up for marriage. I thought my duties mostly involved reaching the high cabinets and pretending not to hear the dryer when it buzzed. But lately, I'd been promoted, without pay or benefits, to head of subtle observations. Not because I wanted to. Because Helen started giving me homework without telling me. The shift started small. Nothing neon lit or dramatic. Just odd little changes in her behavior that didn't quite match the Helen I married. Like how she suddenly became extremely interested in trivia night at the library. Not books. Not reading. Not knowledge in general. Just trivia. Every Thursday night. Rain or shine. With what she called the girls, even though these girls never materialized into actual human beings I could verify. "Who are the girls?" I'd asked once, loading the dishwasher while she adjusted her earrings in the hallway mirror. I wasn't expecting a full bio, but a first name would have been nice. "Oh, you don't know them. They're from the yoga class I stopped going to." Solid. And then there was the printer. We owned a printer. Bought it 3 years ago. Used it twice. Once to print return labels, once to confirm it didn't work properly. It lived on the second shelf of our IKEA bookshelf like a retired athlete who was too expensive to get rid of. But one afternoon, I came home to the smell of melting toner and the comforting hum of a printer coming to life for the first time since quarantine. I walked into the office, and Helen was standing there, pulling papers from the tray like she was defusing a bomb. Her expression was the face equivalent of slamming a laptop shut when someone walks in. "Printing something?" I asked. Polite. Casual. Like a man unaware he was about to enter a new genre of marriage. "Just tax stuff," she replied, folding the papers quickly and placing them into a bright red folder labeled Yard Projects. "Sure, because that's where everyone keeps their IRS paperwork, next to sketches of hypothetical flower beds." That red folder ended up becoming the Bermuda Triangle of our house. It moved around constantly. One day it was on the bookshelf. Next, it was in the kitchen junk drawer under 17 expired coupons. Then it migrated to the garage, wedged behind a box labeled Halloween. Maybe 2018? And of course, one fine Tuesday afternoon, when Helen was at one of her famous The Girls meetups and I was looking for duct tape to fix a cracked drawer, because buying a new one would insult the legacy of the old one, I spotted the red folder inside an old shoe box next to the toolbox. I'm not proud of what I did next. But you don't leave the Ark of the Covenant in the garage and expect Indiana Jones not to peek. Inside were a handful of printed emails, all dated over the past month. I'm not sure what I was expecting. Maybe email receipts from online yoga courses or passive-aggressive exchanges with customer service over a delayed face cream. What I got instead were notes from a man named Calvin. Not Calvin from work. Not Calvin from spin class. Not Calvin who once sold us an air purifier that sounded like a jet engine. No, this Calvin was, according to his sign-offs, a consultant in strategic leadership alignment. That's a real title he typed. On purpose. Multiple times. The emails weren't romantic. Not directly. They were strategic. Like two spies coordinating a covert mission that somehow involved meeting again Tuesday at the co-op and discussing long-term positioning in person. There was even a sentence that read, "We should be cautious moving forward." You know how Dennis is with details. Interesting. I checked the sender address. Not Gmail. Not Yahoo. A custom domain at bridgetthinksforward.com, which raised exactly two questions. Who's Bridget, and what is she thinking forward from? I didn't tell Helen I found the folder, partly because I wanted to see where it led, and partly because confronting your spouse with printed PDFs in hand feels like a scene from a TV show where the audience is already rooting for your inevitable downfall. Instead, I got smart. Not smart like, change my name and move to a lighthouse, but smart enough to test the waters. That Thursday, as Helen prepared for another trivia night, wearing lip gloss and a scarf in the middle of August, I asked if she could grab eggs on her way home. She blinked. Eggs? Yeah. The trivia place is next to the co-op, right? Might as well kill two birds. A beat of silence. Right. Of course. She left 15 minutes earlier than usual. By the time she came back, she'd forgotten the eggs. Twice. The next week, I took it further. I drove to the co-op. I wasn't expecting anything cinematic. No dramatic kiss near the kombucha. I just wanted a glimpse. And boy, did the universe deliver. There, in the parking lot, beneath a crooked tree and a sign advertising local beets, $3.99 per pound, stood Helen. Laughing. Standing too close to a man who wore his confidence like a discount blazer. He had those jeans that are tight in the way that says, "I own a very expensive bicycle I never ride." And there was no mistaking him. This was Calvin, Mr. Strategic Alignment himself. They weren't kissing. They weren't holding hands. They were just being. But in a way that two people aren't unless they've quietly decided to rearrange the truth. I didn't confront them. I didn't pull into the lot or honk or invent a scene. I drove past slowly, watched from the intersection, and turned the corner like I'd just witnessed two strangers enjoy a chat about ethically sourced lentils. That night, Helen told me trivia had been amazing. They'd won third place and were only one question away from securing victory. The question, she said, was about Greek mythology. Can you believe I got that wrong? I nodded, smiled. Well, I said, I guess not everyone gets to be the hero. She laughed. She didn't get it. People always say confrontation is about bravery. I disagree. Most confrontations happen because someone ran out of patience, not fear. In my case, it wasn't even about patience. It was about curiosity mixed with a healthy dose of boredom. You reach a certain point in your marriage where you're no longer afraid to pull the string. You just want to see if it unravels into something or if it's all decorative fluff. It started on a Sunday afternoon, which felt fitting. That's the day of the week with the most potential for psychological warfare. Too lazy for productivity, too close to Monday to enjoy anything, and ripe for passive-aggressive chores. Helen had been unusually cheerful that morning. She'd dusted shelves we didn't even use. She hummed. She asked if I wanted tea. That last part really raised a flag. She hasn't asked if I wanted tea since Obama was in office. So I tested the water. Hey, I said, stretching like I was just another harmless husband in sweatpants. I was thinking we should have dinner with your trivia friends sometime. Her hand stopped halfway through wiping the baseboard, which was a hilarious choice of cleaning target considering we hadn't had guests in 3 months. She stood upright like she'd just been caught rewriting history. They're a bit introverted, she said. Perfect, I smiled. So am I. We'll cancel each other out. Helen didn't reply right away. She folded the rag like it owed her money and walked to the laundry room, pretending it was urgent. I followed casually. I had no actual business in there. I just leaned against the dryer, arms crossed, watching her sort imaginary clothes. So which one of them drives the red Volvo? I asked. She didn't look up. What? I saw it parked at the co-op. Figured it belonged to one of the trivia squad. Helen turned slowly like she was loading a spreadsheet in her head. Oh, I don't know. I never pay attention to cars. Interesting answer from a woman who once spent 14 minutes lecturing me about the difference between a hatchback and a crossover. I nodded thoughtfully. Well, the guy getting out of it seemed pretty chatty. Still no eye contact. Just a lot of folding. Now, here's where most people imagine confrontation means yelling. Nope. Yelling is for people who think they can win by volume. I was more interested in creating the kind of discomfort that rearranges furniture in your brain. Helen was expecting me to throw out accusations. Instead, I kept things neat. So, I continued. What's Calvin's last name? She blinked. There it was. The moment she realized I wasn't asking. I was confirming. What? She repeated, but her voice had dropped an octave. Calvin. You know, your fellow alignment strategist. The one with the email signature that sounds like a corporate breakup letter. Helen set down the rag, slowly now. The laundry basket was still empty. You went through my things. You left them in the garage, Helen, between expired firecrackers and a broken camping chair. It wasn't Fort Knox. She sat on the edge of the washer. Not dramatically, just with that tight efficiency that told me she was about to switch tactics. I didn't cheat on you, Dennis. Oh, the classic opening move. Deny, then pivot. I waited. We were collaborating on a project, she said. What kind of project requires meeting behind parked cars and writing each other emails that read like a soap opera's B-plot? Now she looked at me. Really looked. Like she was trying to gauge how much I knew versus how much I was bluffing. You misunderstood. Did I also misunderstand the part where you said, you know how Dennis is with details? Because I have to admit, Helen, that part felt unusually specific. She sighed. Not the I'm tired kind of sigh, but the this argument is inconvenient to my schedule kind. All right, she said finally. Fine. We've been talking. A lot. He gets me. I raised my eyebrows. Gets you? Like a Spotify algorithm or a favorite barista. She rolled her eyes, which felt like progress. Look, she said. This wasn't supposed to be a thing. It started because I needed a sounding board. Someone outside this house who didn't make everything into a sarcastic monologue. Ouch, I said, hand over heart. My entire personality just got disinvited. Helen stood. You don't take anything seriously. I take betrayal pretty seriously. So this is perfect timing. It wasn't an affair, she said quickly. We didn't do anything. I didn't ask if you did. And that was true. I hadn't. I wasn't interested in the physical details. This wasn't about anatomy. It was about the committee meetings behind my back. She didn't respond. So I changed direction. Why Calvin? What's that supposed to mean? Of all people, he calls himself a consultant for strategic leadership alignment. That's not even a thing. That's a TED Talk that never happened. He listens to me, she said flatly. He doesn't make everything into a joke. There it was again. That accusation disguised as confession. I nodded slowly. Okay. That's it. That's it. She looked confused. Disarmed. Probably expected tears or a thrown lamp. Sorry, Helen. All the drama's been outsourced to your new project partner. Well, what do we do now? She asked after a pause. Now, I said, checking the time on the microwave. Now we finish the laundry. She narrowed her eyes. You're not angry? I'm something better than angry. I'm efficient. Dennis. Don't Dennis me. You made this complicated. I'm just keeping score. Helen didn't reply. She walked past me, stopped at the door like she wanted to say something else, then thought better of it and left. The dryer beeped behind me. Perfect timing. And that was it. No shouting. No slamming doors. Just a Sunday laundry session with more plot than usual. My revenge started with a spreadsheet. Not exactly Shakespearean, I know, but I wasn't aiming for poetic justice. I was aiming for highly organized, color-coded, self-formatted efficiency. The kind of revenge that doesn't raise its voice, doesn't wear black, doesn't dramatically burn love letters. The kind that uses conditional formatting and locked tabs. Let me rewind. After the laundry room confrontation, Helen did what Helen does best, retreat into vague busyness. She filled her schedule with personal errands and new opportunities, while conveniently forgetting we still co-owned a house, shared an internet plan, and pretended to be on the same team whenever our insurance company called. To the outside world, we were still a respectable suburban couple who smiled at neighbors and parked in the same driveway. Inside, we were quietly auditioning for separate lives. She thought she had the upper hand. That was cute. The first step in my campaign wasn't dramatic. It was delightfully mundane. I logged into our joint email account, the one we only ever used for utility bills and the occasional passive-aggressive Amazon return. I set up a new folder titled Helen's Vision Board and filtered every email she received from BridgetHinksForward.com straight into it. No alerts. No flags. Just quiet digital gardening. Next, I opened a new Google Sheet. Tab 1. Helen and Calvin Timeline. Tab 2. Inconsistencies in Helen's weekly schedule. Tab 3. potential witnesses with poor judgment. Mostly the trivia group, should they ever be confirmed to exist. It wasn't about catching her. That part was already done. This was about the part people forget. Maintenance. Keeping the lie alive takes work. Making it unravel, though, that's just accounting. Now, to be fair, I didn't plan on weaponizing the spreadsheet. I just liked knowing I had something she didn't. For once. While Helen continued pretending to live in a rom-com directed by a man named Calvin, I got busy updating our neighborhood association's community site. You see, I'd been elected to the Digital Communications Committee the year prior. Helen thought it would help me engage more. What it actually did was give me full access to the monthly newsletter, the calendar, and the event planner. So I added something new. Thursday night, Trivia Social plus Meet the Locals. Bring a friend, share a drink, maybe win a prize. Hosted at Dennis and Helen's. Starts at 7 p.m. I made the font tasteful. Classy. The kind of serif that says, "We're stable people who own coasters." I even added a quote at the bottom. Honesty is the best trivia strategy. No one in particular. Then I printed 25 flyers and dropped them off at every mailbox on our block, just to be sure the ones who never opened their emails wouldn't miss out. Thursday arrived. Helen, naturally, hadn't noticed a thing. That morning, she breezed into the kitchen wearing that blouse with sleeves so wide they could collect rainwater. "Going out tonight," she said, not even trying to pretend anymore. "Oh," I asked. "Trivia?" She hesitated. "Something like that. Sounds fun. Don't forget we're hosting a little get-together." Now she paused. "What get-together?" I took another sip of coffee. "Neighborhood social." I mentioned it. "You probably forgot." "Happens." She blinked like her contact lens had betrayed her. "Here." "Yep. 7 o'clock. We're the Thursday stop. Should be light. Some snacks, maybe a casual game or two." Helen stared at me like I'd just admitted to training carrier pigeons in the garage. "You didn't ask me. You weren't exactly available." She opened her mouth, closed it, and settled for an eye roll followed by a text she didn't want me to see. I assumed it was to Calvin. Probably something inspiring like, "Dennis is being Dennis again." I cleaned the living room, set out some chairs, and even printed trivia cards from an old party game box we never used. The theme? Lies people tell. Each card had completely fake questions that looked real but made no sense. Example: which 17th century Dutch explorer first claimed the moon was made of fermented wheat? The answer was always Herman. Just Herman. Guests arrived. 17 in total. Mostly neighbors we waved to, but never really knew. They came with reusable grocery bags full of off-brand soda and small talk. By 7:15, the room was alive with the kind of conversations people have when they're not sure if they're friends or just adjacent. Helen returned at 7:23. She walked in through the garage like she expected to sneak past a hostage situation. She was wearing makeup, heels, and an expression that said, "This night was supposed to be about me." "Hey, honey," I called out. "Calvin couldn't make it?" Her smile froze like bad Wi-Fi. "Excuse me." "Oh," I said, louder now. "I just figured Calvin would have wanted to meet the locals too, since you two have been collaborating so closely." The room quieted slightly. Only slightly. No one knew who Calvin was, which made it even better. Helen walked over to me, still smiling, but now with the precision of a politician at a debate. "We're not doing this." "Doing what?" "This," she hissed. "Whatever this is." "Oh, this is trivia night," I said, motioning to the cards. "You love trivia?" "In fact, I have a round all about relationships based on miscommunication. Want to play?" She stepped closer, whispering. "You're being ridiculous." "Hey everyone," I called out, turning to the guests. "Helen wants to skip trivia. Should we vote on it?" Polite chuckles. A few people nodded like they were too deep into their warm sprite to object. Helen left the room. I let her. After the event died down, and the neighbors packed up their half-eaten hummus and folding chairs, I sat in the silence of the house that still technically belonged to both of us. She was upstairs. I didn't follow. I had already won. My revenge wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was an RSVP to her secret party, and I brought the entire neighborhood. It didn't happen immediately. There wasn't some big curtain drop, no sweeping monologue or a piano playing in the background like we were characters in a limited series on a streaming platform that thinks murmuring counts as dialogue. No, it was exactly 11 days after trivia night when Helen decided to finally speak to me like I existed in the physical world and not just as a legal name on the mortgage. She waited until after I'd finished mowing the lawn. Not because she cared about the timing, but because Helen never liked the smell of cut grass. Said it gave her itchy thoughts, which made absolutely no sense. But after 7 years of marriage, I'd stopped asking for clarification on 60% of her vocabulary. I walked into the kitchen, sweat sticking to places it didn't belong, and there she was, sitting at the kitchen table like she'd just remembered it was there. Laptop closed. Phone nowhere in sight. That alone was suspicious. "Can we talk?" she said, with the tone people use when they ask if a chair is taken. "Sure," I replied, because I knew this wasn't a real question. It never is. I didn't sit right away. I filled a glass with water, not because I needed one, but because sitting down first felt like giving up early. Helen looked nervous, which was new. Normally, she had that serene, vaguely superior expression of someone who organizes their emails by color. "I've been thinking," she started. Promising. That's how most disasters begin. I took a seat and said nothing. She hated when I did that. It forced her to be direct, and directness wasn't her strong suit unless she was giving someone a review online. "I know things have been tense." I raised an eyebrow. Tense is when the thermostat's set to 71 and you want 70. This has been something else entirely. Helen blinked. "Okay. Yes. More than tense. You could call it, I don't know, fraudulent with a chance of theatrics." She ignored the jab. "Dennis, I've been reevaluating everything." "Oh good, because I was worried you were just running on vibes." "I mean it," she said, a little sharper now. "I've been thinking about us, and the house, and everything. Everything seems like a lot to handle all at once. Start smaller. Try the part where you had secret meetings with a man who writes motivational quotes like he's stuck in a startup pitch." Helen exhaled. Not a sigh, too dramatic. Just a low-pressure release of words that weren't ready to exist. "I didn't sleep with him," she said finally, which felt like her version of a peace offering. "Thanks for the memo. You get a sticker for technical honesty." "Dennis." "No, I'm actually curious," I said, leaning back in the chair that creaked just enough to make the moment irritating. "What was the plan? Were you going to slowly transition from wife to Calvin's brand consultant? Move into a condo with exposed pipes and matching mugs that say hers and also hers, but with more mindfulness?" "I didn't have a plan," she said. "Well, at least we finally have some agreement." We sat in silence. Real silence. Not the kind we used to have during TV shows or during meals where she scrolled through articles about self-discovery while I read about ways to fix garage doors that weren't broken. This was the kind of silence where two people both realize they can't go back to pretending their house hasn't been slowly sinking this whole time. Helen folded her hands. "I made a mistake." "That's true," I said. "Several, actually. In rapid succession. But go on." I kept trying to figure out what went wrong. Like maybe I just missed something. Or maybe we drifted. "We didn't drift. You built a whole second boat and tried to row it behind my back." "I didn't mean to," she said. "That's not the defense you think it is." Another pause. She glanced around the kitchen like the walls might offer her backup. "They didn't." I felt bored, she said. "That's probably the most honest thing you've said in months." "It's not personal." "Oh, it absolutely is. You just don't want it to sound like it is." Helen opened her mouth, closed it, then started again. "Dennis, I never stopped loving you." I looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in a long time, I saw someone I didn't recognize. Not a stranger, exactly. Just someone who'd been editing herself so long she forgot which version was the original. "That's nice," I said finally. "But it doesn't mean what it used to." She tilted her head. "So what now?" That was the real question, wasn't it? What now? We weren't at war. There were no sides to pick, no flags to wave, no winners to declare. It was just two people sitting in a house they used to share, trying to decide if the next chapter should be written in pen or just skipped entirely. "I'm not going to fight you," I said. "Not in the way you expect. I'm not interested in the soap opera version of this." Helen nodded like she understood, but I don't think she did. "I'm moving out," I continued. "Not right away. I'll give it a week. But I've already made arrangements." She blinked. "Wait, you're leaving?" I thought that part was obvious. "But this is our house." "No, Helen. This is where the performance happened. The house just had good lighting." She stared at the table. I could tell she wanted to say something meaningful, something she could quote later in a group chat. But nothing came out, just her fingers tapping on the wood like she was waiting for a prompt. "I don't want it to end like this," she said eventually. It didn't end like this, I replied. This is the part where we acknowledge it's been over for a while. Helen's eyes shimmered. Not tears, not quite. Just the reflection of someone who wasn't used to losing control of the script. I didn't expect you to walk away, she said quietly. That's because you kept assuming I'd stand still. I stood, finished the last of the water, set the glass in the sink without rinsing it, just because I knew it would bother her later. Then I walked upstairs to start packing the life I wasn't going to pretend to fix anymore. The first night out of the house was quiet, which would have been great if quiet wasn't so loud when you're alone. I hadn't moved into some cinematic bachelor pad or rented a loft with exposed brick and emotionally available lighting. I was staying in a one-bedroom unit above a real estate office owned by a man named Jerry who smelled like packing tape and had a collection of wall clocks he insisted were very collectible despite 3 of them being plastic and permanently stuck at 214. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't creak under the weight of unsaid things. That was already an upgrade. I didn't make a big exit. No suitcases lined up like I was embarking on a cruise. Just 2 trips with a rental van and the kind of cardboard boxes that dissolve emotionally the second you look at them too hard. Helen was home for the first trip, upstairs doing laundry that didn't need to be done, folding things that already lived in drawers. We didn't speak. She didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't leave a note. We'd exhausted the performance quota weeks ago. People talk a lot about healing. You know, healing takes time. Healing isn't linear. Healing means yoga now. But nobody ever tells you that healing mostly looks like fixing your own Wi-Fi and trying to remember which day the trash gets picked up. It's watching bad local commercials at 2 a.m. because you haven't set up your streaming accounts yet. It's realizing your name is still on the electric bill for a house you're never stepping foot in again. In the first week, Helen sent me 3 texts. Day 1, let me know if you want to talk. Day 4, the lawn guy came today. He said you still owe for May. Day 7, you left your winter jacket. It's in the hall closet. I didn't reply, not because I was angry, just because I didn't have anything to say that didn't sound like a punchline, and frankly, I was tired of always being the one who had to deliver them. I took the week off work, told them I was handling personal matters, which is corporate code for trying to remember who you are without the person who's been narrating your life with post-its and passive comments about hand towels. I didn't do anything productive. No big revelations. No spreadsheets labeled my new identity. Just a lot of sitting, sometimes with purpose, sometimes without. I didn't miss Helen in the romantic sense. I missed knowing what I was supposed to be doing next. I missed having a default plan, even if the plan involved arguing over the correct way to load a dishwasher. By the second week, the world adjusted itself. I updated my address with the DMV. I bought a trash can that didn't match anything because it didn't need to. I replaced my keychain because the old one had a tiny engraved H+D that looked ridiculous now. These weren't symbolic acts. They were just tasks that kept me from spending too much time in my own head. Helen called once. Just once. She didn't leave a voicemail. I appreciated that, honestly. It showed a degree of restraint that, had it been available to us earlier, might have saved us 3 years of quiet irritation and at least 1 decorative vase. The funny thing about distance is that it doesn't always bring clarity. Sometimes it just removes the background noise long enough for you to realize the song was never that good. I wasn't broken. I wasn't thriving. I was decently okay, which, considering the last 2 months, felt like a statistical win. On a Thursday, I ran into Bridget. Not the Bridget, Calvin's imaginary employer, but the real one. As it turned out, she worked at the same real estate office downstairs, in accounts. She was the one who helped set up my lease. Very organized. Wore glasses that made her look like she judged fonts recreationally. She caught me by the coffee machine and said, "You're the guy who moved in upstairs, right? From that street with the hedge wars." "Yep," I said. "That's me. Former captain of Team Reasonable Hedges." We chatted. It was light, easy, the kind of small talk that didn't pretend to solve your life. I told her I'd just gone through a split. She nodded with the sympathy of someone who's handed out a lot of security deposits to single men with tired eyes. "Fresh starts are weird," she said. "Not bad. Just weird." "Yeah," I said. "Kind of like when a restaurant changes their menu and keeps telling you it's still the same vibe." She laughed. Real laugh. No calculations. I didn't ask her out. This isn't that kind of ending. But I didn't feel like an abandoned museum exhibit anymore either. And that was something. The last thing I did before closing that chapter completely was send Helen an email. Just one. No greeting. No dramatic subject line. Just a few lines. Helen, you were right about something. We got bored, but we didn't talk about it. You outsourced your boredom. I spreadsheet mine. That house never felt like mine. Now I know why. Keep the jacket. I've got others. Dennis. No send-off. No closure. Just a final memo from one department to another before the office restructured itself. And that was that. No revenge fantasy. No dramatic speech. Just one person getting on with it while the other rewrites the past into something more flattering. You can call it moving on. I call it Thursday. The end. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel